Getting approval for hemp buildings is not difficult.
So there, Kirstie's just going to give us from the Hemp Building Directory 5 minutes on the standards, and then we'll look at bringing on another speaker to give you a little bit more of a virtual experience. Over to you, Kirstie.
Thank you very much. I'm Kirstie Wulf. You might have seen me on the stand, which is the Hemp Building Directory, but by profession I'm a building designer. So what does a building designer do? It basically is taking a brief from the clients, drawing up house plans, but also getting council approval. So in terms of that, I just wanted to address some of the issues about that and kind of demystify the fact that getting approval for hemp buildings is not difficult. It's about reading the legislation, understanding the legislation and complying. So basically I'm from New South Wales, but the process is quite similar whether you are in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania. In looking at approvals, it can either be a two-step or a one-step process depending on your land zoning. That will be set out in New South Wales, it's called your LEP, different in Victoria, but basically it is your planning legislation and it will set out what you can build on what particular block of land. And so if you need to go through what's called a DA in New South Wales or a planning permit in Victoria, what that is all about, it's all about can you build that class of building on that particular site with that particular size of building. It's rather agnostic in relation to what you're actually building the material, the building out of. Bearing in mind, you'd obviously need to comply with your fire regulations, particularly if you're looking at commercial type buildings. But when it comes down to looking at using Hempcrete, it's actually usually at your building permit or in New South Wales construction certificate stage. And that is where you need to show that your building complies with the Building Code of Australia. The other process I was talking about, which is a one-stage process, which is where you have a combined planning and building permit together, in which case in New South Wales it's called a CDC, which is a complying development, and you would therefore need to show that you meet the specific planning requirements and the building code requirements all in one go. So looking at the building code and sort of saying, what do we need to prove? So interestingly, for those not in the building area, the building code is actually a performance-based code. And what it says is, it says buildings need to meet certain performance requirements. Now, there is a standard methodology called deemed to satisfy, and if I could describe that as a bog standard building, which often isn't sort of a great performance in terms of what our buildings could do, but they are often covered by deemed to satisfy. So if you meet the deemed to satisfy requirements, you don't really need to do anything further. Everything else is called a performance solution. So anything, and you'd be surprised how many common building products in Australia actually get through with performance solutions because they're not covered by deemed to satisfy. So that performance solution methodology can be done in a number of ways, and what you need to do is identify what areas of the building code you are saying that this material needs to comply with. Commonly with Hempcrete, it's going to be things like weatherproofing, fire, acoustic, those types of things to show that it meets those requirements. And in that performance solution, there's a number of different pathways you can go down. And you might have heard some discussion in relation to CodeMark. So CodeMark is actually one pathway that you are actually fulfilling a performance solution. CodeMark is actually an independent organisation which will carry out testing, or actually take your testing and carry out independent analysis of that and say, yes, we are happy that the information that is being provided means that you meet this, this and this section of the building code. So what it means for your building surveyor, when they're looking at that documentation, they get that CodeMark certificate and say, yep, it says tick, we don't need to go any further. If you are doing a performance solution, Commonly those are provided by engineers. It can be done by other people. The building code actually sort of said it needs to be done by an appropriately qualified person, but it's your building surveyor who will sort of be able to let you know who they're satisfied is the appropriately qualified person for that. But it's also about liability, because in effect you want someone who's actually be able to take on that responsibility to sort of say, I have the qualifications behind me and I am satisfied that this material will meet those sections of the building code. Now, that can be done by a number of ways. One of them is by expert opinion. Now, that is okay for residential, but expert opinion doesn't apply to commercial. So you really need to go through either a verification method, and that is a sort of more detailed set out in the building code, or you can do comparison to deemed to satisfy. So they'll have a list of what the deemed to satisfy requirements were, and you can actually look at it and say, well, this is what they had in the deemed to satisfy, this is how we're doing it, and what we're doing is actually directly comparable to that. If you're looking at purchasing a commercial product for a client, what you want is you want that supplier to actually provide you with that information, either in the way of a performance solution or documentation that you can take to, usually they work with similar engineers, saying that you can take that to them to get that performance solution. And that's one of the reasons why most of the approved residential builds in Australia have been done using commercial products, because they have that research and that testing behind them that you can take and you can get your performance solution. So it might sound slightly complex, but once you've done it once, it's really quite straightforward. And as I said, I know Clara's here from the Australian Hemp Masonry. They'll actually provide you with that information to assist you with getting all of that done, which actually makes it a lot easier. And so I'd like to sort of say, for people who are interacting with clients, builders, architects, whatever, it's not difficult, you know. So it's just sort of saying, yep, we know what we need to do. And interesting, this is not simply something that Hempcrete needs to do. I actually do a lot of other natural buildings, so things like straw bale and earth, and they're actually all in the same situation, or actually probably even more difficult, in the sense that though a lot of those materials don't actually have some of the same research behind them. So thank you very much. I hope that sort of has helped demystify that a little bit for everybody.
Well, that was great, because we did need to hear some of that, because I was a bit confused about CodeMarks and performance and statements and things like that. So thank you, Kirstie, from the Hemp Building Directory.